Elliotte Friedman had more than one massive scoop on Donnie Dhali yesterday with a huge report on two of the Canucks' biggest upcoming free agents that have proven to be the team's most valuable assets this season and must be kept at all costs. We're going to be breaking down all of that in this episode of Canucks Digest, so first make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you don't miss any and all Canucks updates as we head through the final games of this regular season. And with that, let's hop into the first topic of the day, which is the best suit at center. So if you guys watched yesterday's video, Mark went into a lot of things that Elliotte Friedman covered on yesterday's episode of Donnie and Dhali, and there was a few things as far as Tom Willander was concerned, some free agents, some summer plans that the Canucks might have, but two that we're going to focus on that Elliotte really touched on is the first one being Pius Suter. Now, Mark covered how Elliotte Friedman was saying that the Canucks' best suit at center might be the guy that's already in the building. But when we're looking at their free agency and negotiations with Suter, the Canucks didn't like his asking price when they negotiated at the trade deadline. Very curious to see if the Canucks restarted the Suter negotiations. No one knows him better than the Canucks. And when you look at Pius Suter this season, he is having a career year. 42 points in 74 games, 22 goals and 20 assists, and a lot of that just being in the month of March alone, where he had 15.7 goals and 8 assists, and a lot of it filling in for that number one center role with the absence of Elias Pettersson throughout this stretch down the regular season, having 117 shots on net total, a few giveaways, a decent amount of takeaways, posting a +2 rating, and his time on ice being at 17:03. And in the month of March, it went up to 18 and almost at 19 minutes. So Pius Suter, he's having a fantastic season when you're looking at his stats. And then when you look at his contract as well, of course, like Mark covered yesterday with a lot of the upcoming UFAs that we have, that Pius Suter is coming in at a $1.6 million cap hit right now. However, he is going to be due for a major payday. And as far as I'm concerned, Pius Suter has earned every single dollar that he is going to be paid. And the thing that Elliotte was touching on that we're going to kind of go over at the tail end of this video and just overall in general when we're talking about contracts is that with the cap hit going up and seeing what guys are getting that maybe they aren't as good as guys like Pius Suter, they're getting a lot more money than probably the Canucks would be willing to pay, is that the dollar amounts that these guys are getting paid now or that are seeming crazy now might not be so crazy in a year from now, in 2 years from now, or by the start of next season with the salary cap bumping up that the way it has been. Now, with a whole lot of things going on in the world right now, there could be a lot of factors that come into that. However, Rogers and the NHL did make a massive broadcasting deal, which will bring in a lot of revenue for Canadian teams and really go a long way towards helping Canadian teams help each other in that sense. We'll see a lot more moves for the Canucks to be able to make probably as a result, especially when that OEL contract is going to go up a little bit as far as that buyout was concerned. Like Mark said yesterday, going up to about $4 million and change as far as against the cap next season. So Vancouver is going to be hampered down a little bit by that. However, with the cap going up and with probably ratings going up in general as hockey continues to grow and grow, I know it hasn't really translated to butts in seats in Rogers Arena this year. However, I mean, last night that was a pretty dismal scene to see throughout the course of the game. Just see all those blue shirts turn into red seats was not a pleasant sight to see. However, with this, Vancouver might be able to get a bit more of a bump when the salary cap goes up so that they can lock down Pius Suter, because with all the options out at center right now, Mark covered it in yesterday's video where there's not a lot out there. There's a few names out there that are pretty good. Duchesne, I think, would be a really good fit in Vancouver as well. Be a bit of an older presence, and he's having a great year in Dallas as well. There's some other guys as well. Mikael Granlund as well. He would be really good. However, when looking at the options at center, how expensive they could be, how old they might be, looking at John Tavares, how Sam Bennett might not want to leave Florida, Pius Suter might be the best available option for Vancouver in this scenario. One, he's already been in the system. He knows the team chemistry. He's been a part of this culture and knows how to play in this Rick Tocchet system. So it's not a culture shock and adjustment if you're bringing in a new guy. Second, look at the way that he has stepped up this season, not just in the past few games, but also overall in this season. He's been one of the underrated stars of this Vancouver Canucks team where a lot of fans, they've been singing his praises all season. And then when the month of March hit, when he really got his opportunity to step up and really be the number one center of this team when Elias Pettersson unfortunately got injured. And even before that, Pius Suter was on a nice little tear before that step up had to happen. Even when he was in that number 2 center role, he was still really excelling this season and playing some of his best hockey, and definitely the best hockey of his career, because he continues to build on it. We've seen a lot of this happen with the Vancouver Canucks ever since Rick Tocchet got there. So with all the comments saying about how they want Rick Tocchet gone, we know players want Rick Tocchet back. We know management wants Rick Tocchet back. And it goes to show when you look at the stats of these players since he got there. Connor Garland has only gotten better every season. Quinn Hughes has only gotten better every season. Elias Pettersson, he had a bit of a setback this year, but again, he was still playing very well with Rick Tocchet. Pius Suter continues to have career seasons. Brock Boeser had a career season with Rick Tocchet as the coach. So these are the things that you got to kind of look at when looking at the Vancouver Canucks this season. Has it been a great season that's translated into wins and playoffs? No, and probably not going to make the playoffs if, in all honesty, there is still a very small little glimmer of hope that the Canucks are holding on to right now. However, the odds aren't looking very likely and probably not looking good for us in the long run. However, what we can do is look forward to the offseason and look at the little things that did go right for us this year. You had Jake DeBrusk filling in as a top 6 guy finally coming from Boston. You had a lot of guys also step up this season. When you look at Pius Suter, he was one of those guys that absolutely stepped up and had another career season. But what do you guys think about the Pius Suter contract stuff? Do you think you absolutely keep him in Vancouver no matter what it takes? Or do you try your best of luck in free agency with the options that are out there, as expensive or as limited as they may be? Let us know what you guys have to say down in the comments. That's going to take us into our second comment of the day, which is pay the man already. And yes, we're talking about Brock Boeser, where Elliotte was saying that Boeser seems to know a number that the rest of the league is willing to give him. Canucks are just below that number. Always easier to solve problems internally. Of course, it will be easier for them to negotiate with Boeser at the end of the regular season before July 1st hits, so they will have a bit of time to kind of talk with Boeser and try and get a more narrowed down on that number. But I think the big thing here that Elliott's saying that I'm really hanging on to is that Boeser knows a number that the rest of the league is willing to give him. That is huge. With everyone in the comments saying how Boeser move on from him, he's wanting too much and all that. All these teams are willing to pay for him. If all these teams are willing to pay for him, it's not like all these teams are willing to just have a mistake happen. If more than one team if it was only one team or two teams seeing it, maybe. But more than a few teams are seeing this. A lot of people in the league know the power that Brock Boeser brings to a team, what he can mean to a team, because what he's meant to Vancouver. Seems like the Canucks and this management, they don't seem to recognize that as much as they should, it seems like. I know in earlier reports, it seems like the Canucks were narrowed down on number. It was just on term that they were really coming to terms with. However, with that, Brock Boeser clearly wants to retire a Vancouver Canuck. If you sign him to a 5 to 6 year deal, by the end of that, he might not be able to go out and get a great contract somewhere else if he, with God forbid, injuries or just aging and things like that. So, yes, you might have to invest a little bit more time into him, but at least it gets him taken care of. It gets you guys taken care of, not having to worry about another big UFA or a massive contract to have to keep re-upping on as well. If you can lock him down for the rest of his career in Vancouver, not have to worry about reworking a contract, not have to worry about another extension, not having worried about paying him even more when that extension comes up, lock him down, especially when you look at his stats this season. 46 points in 68 games, 24 goals, 22 assists. Not exactly the 40 goals he hit last season. However, he still can reach 30 goals by the end of the season if he just continues on the tear that he was on, especially in the month of March. When you look at that, 10 points, 6 goals, 4 assists in multi-goal games in back-to-back games. The overtime loss to St. Louis and the blowout win against Winnipeg, where he also had an assist in that game for 3 points. Now, this brings me to my biggest thing about Brock Boeser. Yes, 46 points, 24 goals. Is it the flashes on the score sheet? No. Is it still enough to be leading the Canucks in scoring and be one of our top scorers? Absolutely. He's up there with Jake DeBrusk. He's up there with Pius Suter, and it is very nice. As much as we haven't scored as many goals this season, and when you look at the top goal scorers for every other team, yeah, they're in the high 20s, they're in the 30s, and much higher. However, with this Canucks team, we like to spread the puck around. We like to spread the wealth. Does that translate to the highest of goal totals? No, it did last season, but it didn't this season. However, when you're looking at Brock Boeser, I'm not looking at the amount of goals he's scoring. I'm looking at when those goals happen, what those goals mean. You look at the ones that we just touched on in March, multi-goal games against St. Louis. That was a game that got us back into it. We got it to overtime. Yes, we lost that game in overtime. However, he was the one who carried us into that game. He carried us through that game and got us into overtime. That is why we love Brock Boeser. Last year in the playoffs, I know I talk about it endlessly because that was a Brock Boeser legacy game. That hat trick in the playoffs in Nashville, enemy territory, enemy playoff territory, and rallying off a hat trick to keep us in the game and lead us to victory. That's what Brock Boeser brings, and that's what teams are looking at, and that's why teams are so willing to pay him what he is asking, but somehow the Canucks aren't there. Yes, 6.65 right now and probably going to get 8. He wants 8 by 8, maybe even a bit shorter if he's able to do that. However, 8 by 8 for a guy like Brock Boeser, and looking at the things that he brings and touching on the things like where you're wondering if Jacob Chychrun's contract will be proof that the cap numbers will go beyond what they are comfortable with. It goes to show that just like Pius Suter and Brock Boeser, what you pay for them now isn't going to be as crazy as what it would be in the future. So in Brock Boeser's case, as much as the salary cap just seems to go up and up every single year, why would you run the risk of putting him on a short-term contract that will expire before he's ready to retire and then have to run the risk of having to extend him for even more money or letting him go to another team for nothing, or you trade him or things like that? However, you can lock him down now until he's retiring. You can still trade him if you want to, but then you don't have to run the risk of him being a UFA again, having to pay him even more money with another extension with him getting up there in age. You lock him down now for the rest of his career as a Vancouver Canuck, and if you want to trade him and move on from him, you still have that ability to do so. It's not worth running the risk of losing him again in free agency or just having to pay him a bunch of money at the tail end of his career. So you go out, you lock him down now. You know what he means to this franchise. He still has great hockey left in him. Obviously, we've seen that on full display, and other teams have seen that as well. And the big thing that I know everyone's going to touch on as well, too, is that, hey, this only happening in March. Where was this earlier in the season from these guys? It doesn't matter when you do it, it just matters that you do it. That was why when Elias Pettersson was getting going before his injury, we were still singing his praises. Niels Höglander as well, we were singing his praises because the Canucks knew that their back was up against the wall. They knew they had to start winning games. They knew they had to rattle them off quickly. So these guys were starting to step up. We were seeing what they were able to do all season. Maybe the pressure wasn't on them enough all season. I don't know. But at least it goes to show that when this Canucks team can get things clicking, when our best players can get things clicking, when our depth players from the AHL guys to the bottom 6 guys can step up, this team can go on a massive run. Now, that's barring injuries, that's barring inconsistencies, and a whole bunch of other factors. However, this Canucks season should not have been as rocky as it was, and we know that we weren't going into this season thinking that we were going to be on the verge of not making the playoffs, or probably not making the playoffs. However, the situation we're in is this, but now you just have to look ahead to next season if you don't make the playoffs this season, and that's when you have to go and look at, okay, what worked for us really great this season? We didn't make the playoffs, okay. What prevented us from making the playoffs? Sorry, injuries and lack of depth. Okay, let's go out and get some other depth guys, make sure our AHL guys are great. We're set at defense and all these other things. Now, what else worked for us? Well, Jake DeBrusk, Brock Boeser, Pius Suter, those were our top goal scorers. Okay, you're going to let 2 of those 3 walk? No, you're not going to get better than that within this system, with this chemistry, and guys that'll bring that to this team with the great success that they've had, or as quickly. Even with Jake DeBrusk, he came here this season. Yes, he was one of those guys who came here this season and could prove an exception to that, but it took a while for him to get going. We were wondering when he was going to start scoring. He eventually did. He was a great power play merchant for us, and it was awesome, but when you have guys that have been there for a few years or even longer in the case of Brock Boeser, you don't let these 2 guys that were 2 of your top 3 goal scorers walk for nothing. You keep them around and you make sure that you can do whatever it takes to keep them here and keep them happy. But what do you guys have to say about all this? I know you guys are going to have your opinions. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say down in the comments below. But that's going to do it for this episode of Canucks Digest. I've been your host, Griffin. Take care.